The bell above Precision Arms and Outfitters chimed as Jessica Thompson pushed through the glass door, her boots clicking against the polished concrete floor. The Denver gun shop was a cathedral of chrome and steel, where serious shooters came to worship at the altar of precision. Display cases gleamed with military-grade optics, and custom rifles lined the walls like expensive artwork. The air smelled of gun oil and testosterone. Behind the counter, shop owner Dale Kruger looked up from cleaning a Barrett .50 caliber rifle. His weathered face, marked by decades of squinting through rifle scopes, creased into what might have been a smile. At 62, Dale had seen every type of shooter walk through his door: military veterans, competitive marksmen, weekend warriors, and rich collectors who bought guns like jewelry. But something about the determined young woman approaching his counter made him pause. "I need a custom precision rifle," Jessica announced, her voice carrying the kind of confidence that made Dale set down his cleaning cloth. She was 28, with shoulder-length auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and green eyes that held an intensity he recognized in serious shooters. But her request was about to shatter every assumption he'd made. "What kind of shooting are you planning to do?" Dale asked, automatically reaching for his order forms. "Long range? Competition? Hunting?" "Precision rifle competition," Jessica replied without hesitation. "I want to compete at the highest levels. National championships. Maybe international. Someday." Dale nodded approvingly. Finally, someone serious. "Excellent choice. Now, what caliber were you thinking?" .308 Winchester is popular for beginners, but if you're serious about competition, we should consider 6.5 Creedmoor, or maybe .300 Winchester Magnum for the longer shots. And for the stock, we have several excellent options in traditional black or woodland camouflage. "I want it pink," Jessica interrupted. Dale's pen stopped moving across the order form. "Excuse me? Hot pink. The brightest, most eye-catching pink you can possibly make it." Jessica's voice didn't waver. "I want people to see this rifle from across the range." For a moment, Dale wondered if he was being pranked. He glanced around the shop, expecting to see hidden cameras or snickering friends. But Jessica's expression remained deadly serious. "Ma'am, I'm not sure you understand. This is for precision shooting competition, not a fashion statement." Jessica leaned forward, placing her palms flat on the counter. "Mr. Kruger, I've been shooting for 2 years. I'm tired of being invisible. I'm tired of being the only woman at matches, trying to blend in with black and camouflage gear, hoping no one notices I don't belong. If I'm going to fail, I'll fail spectacularly. If I'm going to succeed, everyone will remember exactly who did it." Dale scratched his graying beard, studying this unusual customer. In his 4 decades in the firearms business, he'd learned to read people. Some came in with bravado that masked insecurity. Others whispered their way through purchases, afraid of their own choices. But Jessica Thompson radiated something different, a quiet fire that suggested she'd already fought internal battles and emerged with unshakable resolve. "Listen, Miss ... He paused, realizing he didn't know her name. "Thompson. Jessica Thompson. Miss Thompson, I appreciate your ... enthusiasm, but competition shooting is serious business. The top shooters, they don't play around with novelty. Colors, they're focused on performance, precision, results. Pink rifle is going to draw the wrong kind of attention." Jessica's smile was sharp as a blade. "Good. I want their attention. I want them looking at me instead of dismissing me. When they see this rifle, they'll remember who's shooting it. And when I start winning, they'll never forget." Dale walked around the counter, stopping in front of a display case filled with precision rifles. Each one was a masterpiece of engineering: stainless steel barrels, carbon fiber stocks, precision triggers that broke like glass. All of them were colored in military-inspired earth tones, or matte black. "These are serious competition rifles," he said, tapping the glass. "They're built for performance, not aesthetics." "Then build me one just like these," Jessica replied, joining him at the display case. "Same specifications, same quality, same precision. Just make it pink." Dale studied her reflection in the glass. There was something in her expression that reminded him of his youngest daughter, the same stubborn determination that had carried Sarah through medical school, despite everyone telling her she was too small, too quiet, too feminine to be a surgeon. "You realize this is going to cost you serious money. A custom precision rifle with competition-grade components, we're talking $8,000 to $10,000 minimum. I have the money. And you understand that once we start this build, once we apply that custom color, this rifle is yours. I can't resell the hot pink precision rifle to anyone else. I wouldn't want you to." Dale returned to his counter, pulling out a fresh order form. "All right, Miss Thompson. Let's talk specifications. For the action, I recommend a Remington 700 as the foundation. It's proven, reliable, and we can customize everything around it. For the barrel, we'll go with a heavy contour stainless steel in .308 Winchester to start you off right. The stock will be a Macmillan A5 with adjustable cheek piece and length of pull." As Dale spoke, Jessica listened intently, asking intelligent questions about barrel twist rates, trigger weights, and scope mounting options. Her knowledge impressed him. She'd clearly done her homework. This wasn't some rich woman's whim. She understood the technical aspects of what she was ordering. "For the scope," Dale continued, "I'd recommend the Nightforce ATACR 7 to 35 by 56. It's what most of the top competitors are using these days. Excellent glass, reliable tracking, and it can handle the recoil. Perfect. And all of its stock action. Barrel, shroud, scope rings, everything that can be colored, I want in that hot pink." Dale made notes on his form, shaking his head slightly. "This is going to take about 6 weeks. The custom color work alone will add 3 weeks to the build time. You sure about this?" Jessica pulled out her checkbook, writing the deposit with swift, confident strokes. "Mr. Kruger, I've never been more sure of anything in my life." As she tore off the check and handed it to him, Dale noticed calluses on her fingertips, the kind that came from serious trigger time. Maybe this pink rifle idea wasn't as crazy as it seemed. Maybe this young woman knew exactly what she was doing. "One last question," Dale said, stapling the check to the order form. "What made you decide on precision shooting?" "It's not exactly a common hobby for double quotes for women," Jessica finished. "My father was a Marine sniper. He taught me to shoot when I was 12. After he died in Afghanistan, I stopped shooting for years. Recently, I decided it was time to honor his memory by becoming the shooter he always believed I could be." Dale extended his hand. "In that case, Miss Thompson, let's build you the most memorable rifle in competition history." As Jessica shook his hand, her grip firm and confident, Dale couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just witnessed the beginning of something extraordinary. The pink rifle might draw laughter at first, but something told him that laughter wouldn't last long. 3 weeks later, when the completed rifle arrived at his shop, Dale had to admit it was stunning. The hot pink finish was flawless, and the rifle's precision components gleamed like jewelry. As he called Jessica to let her know her order was ready, he found himself curious about what would happen next. He didn't have long to wait. The Colorado State Precision Rifle Championship dawned crisp and clear, with the kind of mountain air that made distant targets shimmer like mirages. Pine Valley Shooting Complex sprawled across 200 acres of pristine Colorado wilderness. Its multiple ranges carved into hillsides that offered shots from 300 to 1,200 yards. This was hallowed ground for precision shooters, a place where legends were born and dreams died with equal frequency. Jessica Thompson arrived at 6 a.m., 2 hours before registration opened. She wanted time to acclimate, to study the wind patterns, to prepare mentally for what she knew would be the most challenging day of her shooting career. Her custom rifle case, emblazoned with her initials in silver lettering, rested in the back of her Ford F-150. Inside that case lay her hot pink Remington 700, gleaming like a neon beacon in its custom-fitted foam. The parking lot gradually filled with pickups, SUVs, and trailers loaded with shooting equipment. Jessica watched through her windshield as competitors began arriving, weathered men in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, carrying rifle cases, with the casual confidence of those who'd been shooting longer than she'd been alive, not a single woman among them. At 7:30, Jessica decided it was time. She pulled on her shooting jacket, a technical piece in neutral tan that she'd chosen specifically to avoid drawing attention. The irony wasn't lost on her that she'd tried to dress conservatively while carrying the most attention-grabbing rifle in the sport's history. The moment she stepped out of her truck, conversation stopped. "Jesus Christ," she heard someone mutter. "Look what the wind blew in." Registration took place in a weathered lodge that served as the range's headquarters. Jessica joined the line of competitors, her rifle case slung over her shoulder. Behind her, two men discussed barrel harmonics in the technical jargon that marked serious precision shooters. In front of her, a grizzled veteran wearing a Vietnam veteran cap examined his range card with a magnifying glass. "First time here, honey?" The voice belonged to Chuck Rawlings, a local shooting instructor whose belly strained against a shirt reading, "Precision shooting. It's not luck." His smile was patronizing, the kind men used when they assumed women needed guidance. "Yes, sir," Jessica replied politely. "Well, you picked a hell of a match to start with. This ain't your typical ladies' auxiliary plinking contest. We're talking precision shooting here. Real precision." Before Jessica could respond, another voice cut through the conversation like a knife. "Chuck, quit bothering the lady and let her register." The speaker was legendary. Bull Morrison stood 6'4", with shoulders that still carried the bulk of his high school football days, despite his 58 years. His reputation in precision shooting was mythical: 3 national championships, 2 world record attempts, and a collection of first-place trophies that filled an entire room in his house. Bull's presence commanded instant respect, and his word carried the weight of gospel in shooting circles. "Just being friendly, Bull," Chuck protested, but he stepped aside. Bull studied Jessica with eyes that had spent decades judging distance, wind, and competition. "You here to shoot or sightsee?" "Shoot," Jessica answered without hesitation. Bull nodded once, a gesture that somehow conveyed approval. "Good. Registration's at the desk." The match director, a precise man named Robert Chun, handed Jessica her competitor packet without looking up from his clipboard. "First time shooting with us?" he asked in a distracted voice. "Yes, sir. Range safety brief is mandatory. Course of fire is printed in your packet. Equipment check starts at 8:30. He finally looked up, ready to move on to the next competitor, when Jessica's rifle case registered in his peripheral vision. "Is that ... pink?" "Yes, sir." The words seemed to echo in the suddenly quiet lodge. Every conversation stopped. 47 pairs of eyes turned toward Jessica and her rifle case. The silence stretched uncomfortably long, broken only by the of fluorescent lights and someone's nervous clearing of throat. "Well," Robert said finally, "that's certainly distinctive." The equipment check took place on the main firing line, where competitors verified their rifles met competition. Specifications. Jessica joined the queue, acutely aware that every shooter behind her was craning his neck to get a better look at her case. When her turn came, she unlatched the case with steady hands. The hot pink Remington 700 gleamed in the morning sunlight, like a piece of exotic jewelry. Gasps and muttered comments rippled through the crowd. "Holy shit," someone whispered. "It really is pink. Looks like a toy gun. Who brings a Barbie rifle to a serious match?" The range safety officer, a retired police marksman named Steve Martinez, examined Jessica's rifle with professional detachment. He checked the action, verified the scope mounting, and tested the trigger pull with a gauge. Remington 700 action, Macmillan stock, Krieger barrel, Night Force scope, he announced. "Everything meets specifications." He looked up at Jessica with something approaching respect. "This is serious equipment under that paint job." "Thank you, sir." As Steve handed back her rifle, Bull Morrison's voice boomed across the firing line. "Well, I'll be damned if it ain't little Miss Pink Rifle." The crowd parted as Bull approached, his own rifle case slung casually over his shoulder. Up close, he was even more intimidating, hands the size of dinner plates, arms corded with muscle from decades of manual labor, and eyes that missed nothing. "That's quite a statement you're making, young lady," Bull continued, his voice carrying clearly across the range. "Real rifles don't come in pink, sweetheart. This ain't a fashion show. This is precision shooting, where men separate themselves from boys." He paused, letting his gaze drift over her rifle. "I'm curious what color your rifle will be when you pack it up after today's reality check." The crowd chuckled, a sound that made Jessica's cheeks burn. But something deeper than embarrassment stirred in her chest, a cold, focused anger that she'd learned to channel during her months of solitary practice. "I guess we'll find out," she replied quietly. Bull's laugh was hearty and dismissive. "Yes, ma'am. I reckon we will." The first stage of the match was a 600-yard prone shot, 5 rounds for score. Jessica drew firing point 12, sandwiched between two veterans who'd been shooting competition for longer than she'd been alive. To her left, Gary Hoffman adjusted his scope with the mechanical precision of someone who'd performed this ritual thousands of times. To her right, Mike Stevens cleaned his barrel with almost religious devotion. "This should be entertaining," Gary muttered to Mike, nodding toward Jessica's pink rifle. Jessica methodically set up her shooting position, extending her bipod, adjusting her scope parallax, and checking her data book for the 600-yard dope. Her movements were deliberate and practiced, the result of countless hours of training. But her hands trembled slightly as she loaded her first round. The range commands began. "Shooters to the line. Make ready. Load and fire when ready." Jessica settled behind her rifle, the pink stock familiar against her cheek. Through her scope, the target appeared crisp and clear at 600 yards. She controlled her breathing, found her natural point of aim, and began her trigger sequence. The shot broke clean, but something felt wrong. The recoil seemed different. Her follow-through rushed. She worked the bolt and fired again, then again, each shot feeling increasingly desperate. When the ceasefire command came, Jessica knew, without looking at the target, that she'd failed spectacularly. The spotting scope confirmed her fears. Her 5 shots were scattered across a 6-inch group, with 2 completely missing the scoring rings. Laughter erupted from nearby firing points. "Looks like someone needs to trade that toy gun for shooting lessons," Chuck Rawlings announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. Bull Morrison's voice carried over the laughter. "That's what happens when you worry more about how your rifle looks than how it shoots." By the end of the first day, Jessica's scores placed her 43rd out of 47 shooters, ahead of only 3 complete beginners who'd never shot beyond 100 yards. Her pink rifle, which had arrived that morning as a symbol of defiant confidence, now felt like a neon sign advertising her failure. As she packed her equipment, The parking lot buzzed with post-match analysis. Groups of shooters clustered around trucks, discussing wind calls, ammunition selection, and equipment choices. No one approached Jessica. "First match jitters," Steve Martinez said quietly, appearing beside her truck as she loaded her rifle. "Case. Happens to everyone." Jessica looked up, surprised by the kindness in his voice. "Does it get easier?" Steve considered the question seriously. "The shooting gets easier with practice. The people ... He glanced around at the groups of shooters, all pointedly ignoring Jessica. "Some of them never change. But the ones worth knowing will judge you by your shooting, not your equipment." As Jessica drove home through the Colorado mountains, her phone buzzed with social media notifications. Photos of her pink rifle were already circulating on shooting forums, Instagram accounts, and Facebook groups. The comments ranged from mildly amused to brutally dismissive. "When you order your precision rifle from a toy catalog, this is why women don't belong in serious competition." Barbie's first precision rifle. More money than sense. But buried among the mockery were a few different voices. Say what you want about the color, but that's some serious equipment. Props to her for trying. Takes guts to show up. I'd like to see some of you critics shoot at, well, your first time out. That night, Jessica sat in her garage, staring at her pink rifle. The fluorescent lights made the custom finish glow like a beacon, beautiful and defiant and utterly distinctive. For a moment, she considered Chuck Rawlings' suggestion about trading it for something more conventional. Then she remembered the weight of her father's dog tags, hanging from a chain around her neck. Master Sergeant William Thompson had never backed down from a challenge, never chosen the easy path, never let others define his limits. Jessica picked up her rifle and began cleaning it with methodical precision. Tomorrow, she would return to her private range. The mockery would fuel her training, the humiliation would sharpen her focus, and that distinctive pink rifle would become the weapon of her transformation. She had work to do. The abandoned quarry sat like a wound in the Colorado landscape. 23 miles southeast of Colorado Springs, where civilization gave way to endless prairie and wind-carved stone. Jessica had discovered it 3 weeks after her humiliating debut at Pine Valley, driving aimlessly through back roads while trying to escape the echo of laughter that followed her everywhere. The quarry had been abandoned for 15 years, its limestone walls rising 200 feet from a floor littered with rusted equipment and forgotten dreams. But Jessica saw something different in that desolate place. She saw possibility. The quarry's unique geography created natural shooting lanes at distances from 200 to 1,400 yards, with backstops that could safely contain rifle fire. More importantly, it was completely isolated. No witnesses, no judges, no one to mock her pink rifle or question her methods. Just Jessica, her equipment, and the relentless pursuit of perfection. At 4:17 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in late October, Jessica's headlights cut through the pre-dawn darkness as she navigated the rutted, dirt road leading to her secret training ground. The temperature hovered at 18 degrees, cold enough to make her breath fog, but not cold enough to affect her ammunition's ballistics significantly. Perfect training weather. She'd been making this pilgrimage for 6 weeks now, 6 days a week, arriving before sunrise and staying until her ammunition was exhausted or darkness made shooting impossible. Her Ford F-150 had been transformed into a mobile precision shooting laboratory, the bed loaded with shooting mats, chronographs, weather stations, and enough ammunition to supply a small army. The ritual never varied. First, she set up her weather station, recording temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, and wind speed at multiple elevations within the quarry. Weather data was everything in precision shooting. A 2-degree temperature swing could move bullet impact 3 inches at 1,000 yards. Next came target setup, using an ATV she'd purchased specifically for the task to place steel targets and paper scoring sheets at precisely measured distances. Her pink Remington 700 had evolved during these weeks of solitary training. She'd added a custom muzzle brake to tame recoil, upgraded to a more precise trigger, and fitted the stock with adjustable components that allowed perfect fit regardless of shooting position. The rifle that had drawn mockery at Pine Valley was now a precision instrument calibrated to her exact specifications. But the real transformation was happening inside Jessica herself. The first week had been brutal. Shooting alone, without spotters or coaches, forced her to develop skills that most competitive shooters took for granted. She learned to read wind patterns by watching grass movement and mirage distortion through her scope. She developed an internal chronometer that could predict when gusts would settle and when updrafts would shift her bullet's trajectory. By the third week, she'd established a training regimen that would have intimidated Marine snipers. 400 rounds per session, fired from positions ranging from prone to standing, at distances from 300 to 1,200 yards. Every shot was recorded in detailed logbooks that tracked ammunition lot numbers, weather conditions, and point of impact. She photographed each target, analyzed every group, and adjusted her technique with scientific precision. The isolation was both blessing and curse. Without distractions, Jessica's focus became laser-sharp. She could spend 3 hours perfecting a single shooting position, making microscopic adjustments until her natural point of aim aligned perfectly with distant targets. But the solitude also amplified every doubt, every replay of that humiliating first competition. On her worst days, she heard Bull Morrison's voice echoing off the quarry walls. "Real rifles don't come in pink, sweetheart." On her best days, she imagined that same voice choking on its words as her pink rifle delivered shots no one thought possible. The breakthrough came during her 5th week of training. Jessica was working on her 800-yard position, trying to achieve consistent sub-minute of angle accuracy from a modified sitting position. The wind was tricky, shifting between 6 and 12 miles per hour from the northwest, with occasional gusts that required constant compensation. She'd fired 37 rounds with mediocre results when something clicked. The 38th shot felt different. The rifle's recoil seemed softer, her follow-through smoother. Through her spotting scope, she saw the bullet impact exactly where she'd aimed dead center of the 8-inch target. The 39th shot landed within an inch of the first. The 40th shot completed a triangle that could be covered by a silver dollar. Jessica stared at the target through her scope, hardly believing what she'd accomplished. 3 consecutive shots at 800 yards, fired in challenging wind conditions, grouped into an area smaller than most shooters could achieve at half that distance. She worked the bolt and fired again. Another perfect hit. Something had fundamentally shifted in her shooting. The conscious thought processes that had governed her trigger control, breathing, and sight alignment had been replaced by muscle memory so ingrained it felt like instinct. Her pink rifle had become an extension of her body, responding to minute adjustments in pressure and position with mechanical precision. She spent the next 2 hours confirming what she'd discovered, firing groups that consistently measured well under 1 minute of angle. As the sun set behind the quarry's western rim, painting the limestone walls gold and crimson, Jessica realized she'd crossed a threshold that separated recreational shooters from true marksmen. But mastering the fundamentals was only the beginning. Jessica began developing training scenarios that would have seemed insane to conventional coaches. She practiced shooting while mentally reciting multiplication tables, training her conscious mind to remain calm while her subconscious handled the technical aspects of precision shooting. She fired hundreds of rounds with earplugs removed, learning to manage the psychological impact of muzzle blast and recoil without flinching. Her most challenging exercise involved shooting immediately after intense physical exertion. She'd sprint 400 yards across the quarry floor, then drop into shooting position and engage targets while her heart rate peaked above 160 beats per minute. The first attempts were disaster shots, scattered wildly as her body fought to process oxygen debt while maintaining precision motor control. But gradually, she learned to compartmentalize physical stress, isolating the muscle groups needed for shooting while allowing the rest of her body to recover. The ammunition consumption was staggering. Jessica burned through 2,400 rounds per week, enough to supply an infantry squad for a month of training. Her reloading bench in the garage worked overtime, producing custom cartridges loaded to match her rifle's exact preferences. She tested 12 different bullet weights, 6 powder charges, and 4 primer types before settling on a load that consistently produced velocities within 3 feet per second of her target. By December, local hunters began encountering evidence of Jessica's secret training. Hikers found spent brass cases scattered across the quarry floor in quantities that suggested military exercises. Ranch hands reported hearing sustained rifle fire coming from the abandoned site, sometimes lasting 6 or 7 hours. A few brave souls investigated, expecting to find a training facility or perhaps illegal activity. Instead, they found something that defied explanation. Targets riddled with holes so precisely placed they looked like machine work. Shooting positions that showed evidence of meticulous preparation and the lingering scent of gunpowder that marked serious shooting practice. But no shooter. Jessica's training schedule allowed her to vanish before curious visitors arrived, leaving only evidence of impossible accuracy. Tom Rodriguez, a local rancher whose property bordered the quarry, became fascinated by the mysterious marksman. He'd served as a designated marksman in Iraq and recognized precision shooting when he saw it. The target arrangements showed tactical thinking, multiple distances, various angles, positions that would challenge even experienced shooters. "Whoever's shooting out there," Tom told his wife over dinner, "they're not fooling around. I've seen Marine sniper training that wasn't this intensive." By January, Jessica's ammunition expenditure had exceeded 20,000 rounds. Her shooting logs filled 3 thick binders with data that read like scientific research. She documented the effect of temperature swings on bullet trajectory, mapped wind patterns at 17 different locations within the quarry, and developed compensation techniques for shooting positions that weren't covered in any manual. More importantly, she'd forged herself into something new. The woman who'd been humiliated at Pine Valley had been replaced by someone harder, more focused, and infinitely more dangerous with a rifle. Her pink Remington 700 had become a precision instrument capable of performance that would astound the same people who dismissed it as a toy. But Jessica wasn't ready to emerge from her underground training yet. She had one more threshold to cross, one more level of mastery to achieve. The spring competition season was approaching, and she intended to return to the shooting world as someone entirely different from the nervous novice they remembered. In the pre-dawn darkness of another training morning, Jessica loaded her equipment with the mechanical precision of ritual. Her pink rifle gleamed under the truck's dome light, beautiful and deadly, and absolutely ready for what was coming next. The laughter was about to stop. The Rocky Mountain Invitational was the kind of match that separated pretenders from contenders. Held annually at Thunder Ridge Shooting Complex outside Denver, it attracted the best precision shooters from across the western United States. A entry fee alone $400 kept out casual participants, ensuring that only serious competitors made the journey to this high-altitude proving ground. 8 months had passed since Jessica Thompson's humiliating debut at Pine Valley. In that time, she'd become something of a legend among Colorado's shooting community, but not for the reasons she'd hoped. The story of the woman with the pink rifle who'd crashed and burned spectacularly had been retold at gun shops and shooting ranges across the state, usually accompanied by knowing chuckles and head shakes. Whatever happened to that pink rifle, lady? Became a running joke among competitive shooters. Most assumed she'd quietly sold her expensive equipment and found a more suitable hobby. A few suggested she'd moved to a different state to escape the embarrassment. No one expected to see her again, which made her appearance at Thunder Ridge on a crisp March morning all the more shocking. At 6:15 a.m., Jessica's Ford F-150 rolled through the main gate like a ghost returning from the dead. The truck looked different, cleaner, more organized, with equipment cases arranged with military precision in the bed. But it was unmistakably the same vehicle that had carried her to her spectacular failure 8 months earlier. Chuck Rawlings was setting up his equipment when he spotted her. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered to his shooting partner. "Look what the cat dragged in." He squinted across the parking lot, confirming what he was seeing. "That's pink rifle. Lady, I thought she'd learned her lesson." Word spread quickly through the competitor ranks. "Pink rifle's back. Can you believe she showed up again? This should be entertaining." By 7 a.m., nearly every shooter at the match knew about Jessica's return, and most were making a point to walk past her truck for a closer look. But something was different about Jessica Thompson. She moved with a confidence that hadn't been there before, fluid, purposeful movements that spoke of countless hours of practice. Her equipment setup was methodical and efficient, each piece of gear placed with the precision of someone who'd performed this ritual thousands of times. The nervous energy that had marked her first competition was gone, replaced by a calm focus that made veteran shooters pause and take notice. Bull Morrison arrived at 7:30, his massive frame emerging from a diesel pickup that looked like it could haul locomotives. At 59, he remained the undisputed king of Rocky Mountain precision shooting, with a collection of trophies that would make museums jealous. His presence at any match elevated the entire field. Competitors shot better when Bull was watching, knowing they were being measured against greatness. "I heard our little pink princess decided to come back for more punishment," Bull announced to his usual circle of admirers. His voice carried across the range with the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "Takes guts, I'll give her that. Stupid guts, but guts nonetheless." The laughter that followed was familiar, the same dismissive chuckling that had accompanied Jessica's first attempt. But this time, she didn't react. She continued setting up her equipment with mechanical precision, seemingly oblivious to the commentary surrounding her return. Rick Patterson, a former Navy SEAL who transitioned to competitive shooting after his military service, watched Jessica's setup with professional interest. During his 22 years in special operations, he'd learned to recognize competence, regardless of packaging. Something about Jessica's movements triggered his attention: the economy of motion, the systematic approach, the complete focus on task completion. "She moves different," Rick observed to his spotter, a retired Marine named Carlos Vega. Carlos followed Rick's gaze, studying Jessica as she assembled her shooting position. "Yeah, like she's done this a few thousand times since we saw her last." The match director called for equipment inspection at 8 a.m. sharp. Jessica joined the line of competitors, her pink rifle case slung over her shoulder with casual confidence. The same case that had drawn stares and whispers 8 months earlier now seemed somehow more purposeful, less like a fashion statement, and more like a tool of war. When her turn came, Jessica opened the case with steady hands. The hot pink Remington 700 emerged like a jewel from its custom foam bedding, but the rifle itself had evolved. New accessories adorned the precision platform: a more aggressive muzzle brake, an upgraded trigger assembly, and a bipod that looked like it belonged on a military sniper rifle. Steve Martinez, the same range safety officer who'd been kind to Jessica after her first disaster, examined the rifle with renewed interest. Significant modifications since last time, he noted, testing the trigger pull with his gauge. Custom muzzle brake, match trigger, precision bipod. Someone's been taking this seriously. Yes, sir, Jessica replied quietly. Steve's examination was thorough, checking scope mounting torque, verifying ammunition specifications, testing the action's function. Everything met competition standards, but more than that, everything showed signs of serious use. The rifle's finish, while still unmistakably pink, bore the subtle wear marks of thousands of rounds fired in training. Passes inspection, Steve announced, handing the rifle back to Jessica. As she accepted it, he noticed something else that had changed her hands. 8 months earlier, they'd trembled slightly with nerves. Now they were steady as stone, with calluses that spoke of serious trigger time. The first stage was a 400-yard prone shot, 5 rounds for score. Jessica drew firing point 7, positioned between 2 veteran shooters who'd been competing at the national level for over a decade. To her left, Gary Hoffman, the same shooter who'd muttered about entertainment during her first match, adjusted his scope with practiced efficiency. To her right, Mike Stevens loaded his rifle with the mechanical precision of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. Here we go again, Gary whispered to Mike, nodding toward Jessica's pink rifle. Think she hit the berm this time? Mike chuckled, but his response was cut short by the range commands. Shooters to the line. Make ready. Jessica settled behind her rifle with movements that flowed like water. Her shooting position was textbook perfect body alignment, bipod placement, scope positioning, all arranged with geometric precision. She loaded 5 rounds of custom ammunition, each cartridge hand-loaded to exact specifications developed during months of testing. Load and fire when ready, came the command. Through her scope, the 400-yard target appeared crisp and clear. Jessica controlled her breathing, found her natural point of aim, and began her trigger sequence. But something was fundamentally different from her first competition. Where nerves had once interfered with her shooting process, now there was only calm focus. Where uncertainty had plagued her wind calls, now she read conditions with the confidence of thousands of rounds of experience. The first shot broke clean, the rifle's recoil absorbed smoothly by her improved technique. She worked the bolt with fluid efficiency and fired again. And again. Each shot felt inevitable, the result of muscle memory so deeply ingrained it required no conscious thought. When the ceasefire command came, Jessica knew without looking at the target that something extraordinary had happened. But it was Gary Hoffman's reaction that confirmed it. The veteran shooter was staring through his spotting scope at Jessica's target, his mouth slightly open in disbelief. Jesus Christ, Gary whispered. That's not possible. Mike Stevens swung his own spotting scope toward Jessica's target and went silent. Other shooters began gathering behind them, drawn by the unusual commotion. One by one, they looked through scopes and binoculars at what Jessica had accomplished. 5 shots, 400 yards, all within a circle smaller than a dime. The group measurement, when officially recorded, was 0.847 inches, a score that would have been impressive at 200 yards, let alone 400. It was the kind of shooting that typically took decades to develop, produced by someone who clearly understood precision rifle marksmanship at a level that transcended simple competence. Bull Morrison pushed through the crowd of spectators, his face skeptical. Let me see that target, he demanded, taking control of the spotting scope. For long moments, he studied Jessica's results in silence. When he finally looked up, his expression had changed from dismissive confidence to something approaching concern. That's some damn fine shooting, he admitted grudgingly. Beginner's luck? Jessica was cleaning her rifle, methodically swabbing the barrel with the same systematic approach she applied to everything else. She looked up at Bull with eyes that held no trace of the nervous energy from her first competition. "We'll find out," she replied quietly. The second stage was 600 yards from improvised field positions. Jessica's score was even better a group. That measured 1.234 inches, placing her second overall behind only Bull Morrison himself. The third stage, shot from 800 yards in increasingly challenging wind conditions, saw Jessica's pink rifle deliver another sub-minute group that left veteran competitors shaking their heads in amazement. By the end of the first day, Jessica Thompson held third place overall in a field of 48 competitors. More shocking still, she was the highest-placed shooter who wasn't either a former military sniper or someone with over 20 years of competition experience. The parking lot after the first day resembled a crime scene investigation. Groups of shooters clustered around trucks, analyzing what they'd witnessed. The same men who dismissed Jessica's pink rifle 8 months earlier now studied her equipment with scientific interest. "She's not the same shooter," Rick Patterson observed to his group of military veterans. "Whatever she's been doing these past 8 months, it wasn't taking cooking classes." Tom Rodriguez, the rancher who'd been investigating the mysterious shooting at the abandoned quarry, listened to the conversations with growing realization. The timeline matched. The precision levels matched. The complete transformation from novice to expert matched. That evening, Tom approached Jessica as she loaded her equipment. "Excuse me, miss. Mind if I ask where you've been practicing?" Jessica looked up, studying the weathered rancher, who clearly knew something about shooting. "Private range," she replied carefully. Tom smiled. "Wouldn't happen to be an old limestone quarry about 20 miles southeast of town, would it?" "For?" The first time all day, Jessica's composure cracked slightly. "You know about that? I've been wondering who was burning through all that ammunition out there. 20,000 rounds, give or take." Tom's expression was respectful. "That's serious training, young lady. Military level serious." Jessica shouldered her rifle case. "My father always said that anything worth doing was worth doing right." As she drove away from Thunder Ridge that evening, Jessica's phone buzzed with the first of what would become hundreds of social media notifications. But this time, the tone was different. "Holy shit, did you see what pink rifle lady just did? That's not the same shooter from last year. No way. Pink rifle just schooled half the field. This changes everything." She shot a .847 at 400 yards. "With a pink rifle, I'm questioning everything I know." The laughter had stopped. The mockery had been replaced by disbelief, then grudging respect, then something approaching awe. Jessica Thompson had returned to the shooting world as someone entirely different from the nervous novice they remembered. And tomorrow's stages would be even more challenging. The second day of the Rocky Mountain Invitational dawned gray and windy, with gusts that made the range flags snap like whips and sent experienced shooters scrambling to check their wind meters. Thunder Ridge's elevated position at 7,800 feet made it notorious for challenging conditions, and today's weather promised to separate the truly skilled from those who'd simply gotten lucky on day one. Jessica Thompson's overnight transformation from laughingstock to legitimate contender had fundamentally altered the dynamics of the competition. The same shooters who dismissed her pink rifle 24 hours earlier now watched her every move with the intensity of students studying a master. But with that newfound respect came something more dangerous, a desperate need of veteran competitors to prove that yesterday's performance was an anomaly. Bull Morrison arrived at the range an hour before the safety briefing, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by the focused intensity he typically reserved for national championships. At 59, he'd built his reputation on psychological dominance as much as shooting skill. Younger competitors often defeated themselves simply by trying to match his legendary composure. But Jessica's emergence as a genuine threat had awakened something predatory in the old champion. "Boys, Bull announced to his circle of admirers. Today we separate the wheat from the chaff. Yesterday was just the warm-up. Today's stage is will. Show us who really belongs here. The first mind game began during equipment preparation. As Jessica methodically cleaned her pink rifle, Bull positioned himself at the adjacent bench, loudly discussing the psychological pressure of competitive shooting with anyone who would listen. You know what separates champions from wannabes? Bull's voice carried clearly across the preparation area. It's not equipment. Hell, you could win matches with a department store rifle if you had the mental toughness. It's what happens when the pressure mounts, when everyone's watching, when you realize you're in over your head. Chuck Rawlings, still bitter about being outshot by someone he'd dismissed as a dilettante, decided to join the psychological warfare. He began telling elaborate stories about shooters who'd had one good day, only to collapse spectacularly when the stakes increased. Seen it 100 times, Chuck said, his voice deliberately loud. Someone gets lucky, starts believing their own hype, and reality comes crashing down. Usually happens on day 2, when the courses get harder and the pressure builds. Jessica continued her equipment preparation without acknowledging the commentary, but Rick Patterson noticed something interesting. Her movements hadn't changed. The same systematic precision, the same calm focus, as if the psychological pressure simply didn't exist in her world. The morning's first stage was designed to test mental resilience as much as shooting skill. Competitors would engage 5 targets at distances from 300 to 750 yards. But with a twist that made veteran shooters nervous, each shot had to be fired within 30 seconds of assuming the shooting position, with no time for extended wind reading or careful position adjustment. Speed precision, the course designer called it, separates the thinkers from the shooters. Gary Hoffman, positioned next to Jessica for the second consecutive day, decided to escalate the mind games. As they prepared for the first target, he began a running commentary designed to disrupt her concentration. Tricky wind out there, Gary observed loudly, shifting between 8 and 15 miles per hour. Easy to misjudge when you're under time pressure. Most shooters panic, rush their shots, blow their scores. He paused, ostensibly adjusting his scope. Course, some folks got lucky yesterday. Different story when the pressure's on. Jessica loaded her rifle and settled into position with the hip. Same fluid efficiency she'd displayed the day before. The 30-second timer began counting down, and competitors around her scrambled to read wind conditions and estimate range. But Jessica's approach was different. She'd already completed her environmental assessment during the setup period, using those precious seconds to confirm what she'd observed rather than starting from scratch. Her first shot broke at the 22-second mark, the pink rifle's report sharp and decisive in the mountain air. Through spotting scopes, officials confirmed a perfect center hit on the 300-yard target. Without hesitation, Jessica transitioned to the second position, her movements smooth and practiced. Lucky wind call, Gary muttered, but there was less confidence in his voice. The second shot, fired at 450 yards with a challenging crosswind, landed within an inch of center. The third, at 600 yards through swirling mountain thermals, was equally precise. By the time Jessica engaged the final target at 750 yards, a shot that required significant elevation and windage compensation, even her harshest critics were watching in fascinated silence. 5 shots. 5 different distances. 5 perfect hits, all fired under intense time pressure while competitors around her struggled with basic wind calls. But the psychological warfare was just beginning. Mike Stevens, a former police sniper who'd been competing for 15 years, approached Jessica during the break between stages. His strategy was more subtle than the crude attempts at intimidation. He wanted to plant seeds of doubt about her equipment and methods. "Hell of a rifle you've got there," Mike said, examining Jessica's pink Remington with feigned admiration. Custom work like that must have cost a fortune. Of course, all that fancy equipment won't help when the wind starts really howling. Seen? Plenty of shooters who relied too heavily on their gear instead of developing fundamental skills. Jessica looked up from her cleaning routine, meeting Mike's gaze with steady eyes. Equipment doesn't pull the trigger, she replied quietly. Mike's laugh was forced. True enough. But when conditions get nasty, when you're shooting at distances that separate the men from the boys, that's when natural talent shows. Some folks are just born with the ability to read wind and judge distance. Others ... T. He shrugged. Others hit their ceiling pretty quick. The afternoon's second stage was specifically designed to test that ceiling. Competitors would engage a single target at 1,000 yards, distance where minor errors in wind reading or trigger control became magnified into dramatic misses. The target itself was unforgiving, a 10-inch steel plate that offered no margin for error. Rick Patterson drew the position next to Jessica, and his approach to psychological warfare was informed by 2 decades of military experience. Instead of crude intimidation, he deployed surgical precision. "You know," Rick said conversationally as they prepared for the 1,000-yard stage, "I've been watching your technique. Real interesting approach. Reminds me of some European shooters I encountered during international competitions. Very methodical. Very systematic." He paused, loading his rifle with practiced efficiency. "Course, European conditions are different from what we get here in Colorado. Altitude changes everything: bullet trajectory, wind behavior, even the way mirage forms. Takes years to really understand how to read conditions at elevation." Jessica continued her preparation without responding, but Rick noticed something that surprised him. Her breathing pattern hadn't changed. In his military experience, shooters under psychological pressure invariably showed physiological responses: elevated heart rate, altered breathing, micro tremors in their hands. Jessica displayed none of these indicators. "Been shooting long?" Rick continued, genuinely curious now, rather than simply trying to disrupt her concentration. "Long enough," Jessica replied, settling behind her rifle. The 1,000-yard stage began with Bull Morrison, whose legendary status earned him the honor of shooting first. The wind was brutal, gusting between 12 and 20 miles per hour from the southwest, with occasional cross-currents that made the range flags dance like dervishes. Bull studied the conditions for nearly 3 minutes before firing, his shot landing just outside the 10 ring for a marginal score. "Damn wind," Bull muttered, but his frustration was evident. If conditions were challenging enough to affect his performance, they would devastate lesser shooters. Gary Hoffman shot next, his bullet missing the target entirely as an unexpected gust pushed it wide right. Chuck Rawlings followed with a similar result, his shot disappearing into the hillside beyond the target. One by one, experienced competitors struggled with the demanding conditions, posting scores that ranged from poor to disastrous. When Jessica's turn came, the psychological pressure from her fellow competitors had reached a crescendo. They'd spent the entire day trying to get inside her head. To find the crack in her composure that would prove yesterday's performance was an aberration. Now, faced with conditions that were humbling even veteran shooters, they expected to witness her inevitable collapse. Jessica assumed her shooting position with the same methodical precision she displayed all day. She studied the wind indicators for exactly 45 seconds, neither rushed nor overly deliberate, then settled behind her pink rifle. Her breathing pattern remained steady, her trigger finger relaxed, her eye relief perfect. The shot broke. Clean and true, the bullet's flight seemingly unaffected by the chaotic wind conditions. Through spotting scopes, officials confirmed what seemed impossible: a perfect center hit on one of the most challenging shots in competitive precision shooting. The silence that followed was deafening. Experienced shooters who'd missed the Target entirely watched in disbelief as a woman they'd dismissed as a novice delivered flawless performance under conditions that had humbled them all. Rick Patterson was the first to break the silence. "That," he said quietly, "was not a lucky shot." Bull Morrison studied Jessica with new eyes, his psychological warfare abandoned in favor of genuine curiosity. "Young lady," he said, his voice carrying none of its earlier condescension, "mind if I ask where you learned to read wind like that?" Jessica was already packing her equipment, the shot forgotten as she prepared for the next stage. "Practice," she replied simply, but Bull wasn't satisfied with such a simple answer. In 50 years of competitive shooting, he'd never seen someone demonstrate such complete immunity to psychological pressure. Most shooters, even accomplished ones, showed some response to intimidation attempts. Jessica had absorbed everything they'd thrown at her, without so much as a change in breathing. "Pattern. That's some kind of practice," Bull admitted. "What's your background? Military? Police?" Jessica shouldered her rifle case, her expression unreadable. "My father was a Marine sniper. He taught me that the mind is just another piece of equipment to be trained and maintained." As she walked away from the firing line, the group of veteran competitors exchanged glances that mixed respect with something approaching unease. They'd spent the entire day trying to psychologically break someone who'd been forged in isolation and tempered by thousands of rounds of solitary practice. Their mind games hadn't just failed, they'd revealed the depth of Jessica's transformation. A pink rifle that had once symbolized naivety now represented something far more dangerous. A shooter who transcended the psychological limitations that constrained everyone else. Chuck Rawlings watched Jessica disappear into the equipment area, his earlier confidence replaced by grudging acknowledgement. "Boys," he said quietly, "I think we might be in trouble." The mind games had backfired spectacularly, revealing not Jessica's weaknesses, but the psychological fragility of her competitors. Tomorrow's final stages would determine whether her mental toughness could withstand the ultimate test shooting for a championship, while everyone watched and waited for her to finally crack under pressure. 6 months after her stunning performance at the Rocky Mountain Invitational, Jessica Thompson had become a fixture on the precision shooting circuit. Her pink rifle was no longer a curiosity. It was a weapon that commanded respect at every range from Colorado to California. But the National Precision Rifle Championship qualifier in Montana represented something different entirely. A gateway to the sport's most prestigious competition, where only the top 20 shooters in the country would earn the right to compete for a national title. The Big Sky shooting complex sprawled across 800 acres of pristine Montana wilderness. Its shooting lanes carved into hillsides that offered challenges from 300 to 1,500 yards. This was where careers were made and legends were born, where the gap between very good shooters and true champions became starkly apparent. The entry fee alone, $800, ensured that only the most committed competitors would make the journey to this remote proving ground. Jessica arrived 3 days before the competition began, using the time to study wind patterns, altitude effects, and the unique challenges presented by Montana's mountainous terrain. At 6,200 feet elevation, bullet trajectories behaved differently than at her familiar Colorado ranges. The air was thinner, winds more unpredictable, and the psychological pressure of knowing that national championship slots were at stake added weight to every shot. The field of 64 competitors represented the cream of American precision shooting. Former military snipers who'd honed their skills in Afghanistan and Iraq, police marksmen with decades of tactical experience, competitive shooters who'd spent their entire adult lives pursuing mechanical perfection, and increasingly younger shooters who'd grown up studying Jessica's techniques through social media, videos, and forum discussions. Bull Morrison had driven up from Colorado specifically to watch Jessica's performance. At 60, he decided this would be his final attempt at qualifying for nationals, and he'd spent months analyzing video footage of Jessica's shooting technique. Her emergence as a legitimate threat had forced him to evolve his own methods, incorporating training techniques he'd observed during her rise through the rankings. "Never thought I'd be taking notes from someone who shoots a pink rifle," Boole admitted to Rick Patterson as they set up their equipment. "But that woman has redefined what's possible in this sport." The first day's stages were designed to eliminate half the field. 64 shooters would be reduced to 32 through a series of increasingly challenging courses that tested every aspect of precision marksmanship. Wind reading, range estimation, position stability, trigger control, and mental resilience would all be pushed to their limits. Jessica's preparation had evolved significantly since her early competitions. Her equipment setup was now a precisely choreographed routine that other shooters studied like a training manual. Every piece of gear had a specific location. Every adjustment followed a predetermined sequence, and her mental preparation involved visualization techniques she developed during her months of isolation training. The morning's first stage placed shooters in a natural amphitheater, where wind conditions created a swirling cauldron of unpredictable air currents. 5 targets at distances from 400 to 900 yards, each requiring different elevation and windage. Corrections with time limits that prevented extensive deliberation. Gary Hoffman, now grudgingly respectful of Jessica's abilities, found himself positioned adjacent to her for what had become their traditional shooting arrangement. "This course is going to be brutal," he observed, studying the wind flags scattered throughout the amphitheater. "Those thermals off the canyon walls will play hell with bullet trajectories." Jessica nodded, but her attention was focused on systematic observation of environmental conditions. She'd learned to read terrain features as indicators of wind behavior, using the landscape itself as a massive wind meter. The way grass moved on distant hillsides, the formation of dust devils in the valley below, even the flight patterns of birds, all provided data for her internal ballistics computer. When the shooting commenced, Jessica's performance was a masterclass in precision marksmanship. Her first shot, at 400 yards through conflicting wind currents, landed dead center despite conditions that sent other bullets wide of their targets. The second shot, at 650 yards across a thermal updraft, was equally precise. By her fifth and final shot at 900 yards, even the match officials were gathering to watch through spotting scopes. 5 for 5, the scorekeeper announced, his voice carrying a note of disbelief. Perfect score on one of the most challenging wind-reading courses we've ever designed. The afternoon brought an even more demanding test: precision shooting from improvised field positions. No bench rests, no comfortable prone positions, just natural terrain features that forced shooters to adapt their techniques to less than ideal circumstances. Shooting from behind logs, around rock formations, from steep hillsides that challenged balance and stability. This was where Jessica's unconventional training methods paid dividends. Her months of practice in the abandoned quarry had included extensive work from awkward positions, forcing her to develop stability techniques that worked regardless of terrain. While other shooters struggled to adapt their bench rest methods to field conditions, Jessica flowed seamlessly from position to position. Mike Stevens, the former police sniper who'd initially dismissed Jessica's capabilities, found himself studying her technique with professional fascination. "Look at how she builds her positions," he observed to a fellow competitor. "Nothing wasted, everything serves a purpose. That's not recreational shooting, that's tactical precision." The day's final stage was designed to be a psychological crusher. A single shot at 1,200 yards, with no spotting rounds and no second chances. Miss the target, and elimination was automatic. The wind was howling at 25 miles per hour, with gusts to 35, conditions that would challenge even world-class shooters. Of the 64 competitors who'd started the day, 38 remained after the earlier stages. Now they faced the ultimate test of nerve and skill. One shot, one chance. Success meant advancing to the second day and remaining in contention for a national championship slot. Failure meant packing equipment and driving home with dreams deferred for another year. Jessica watched as competitor after competitor succumbed to brutal conditions. Veteran shooters with decades of experience missed the target entirely, their bullets swept away by wind gusts that seemed to defy prediction. The success rate hovered around 30%, turning the final stage into a lottery as much as a test of skill. When her turn came, Jessica's preparation was methodical and unhurried. She studied wind indicators for exactly 90 seconds, noting patterns in the grass movement that suggested brief lulls in the chaotic air currents. Her breathing remained steady, her pulse controlled, as she settled behind her pink rifle for the most important shot of her competitive career. The target at 1,200 yards appeared tiny through her scope, a steel plate that represented the difference between advancing and elimination. Wind flags throughout the range showed conflicting information, suggesting air currents that would challenge even computer-calculated ballistic solutions. Jessica's shot broke clean during a brief lull in the wind, the bullet's flight seemingly guided by instinct rather than calculation. Through spotting scopes, officials tracked the projectile's arc across the Montana landscape, watching as it curved through the chaotic air currents with impossible precision. The metallic ring of bullets striking steel echoed across the amphitheater, followed by stunned silence from competitors and spectators alike. In conditions that had defeated 60% of the field, Jessica's pink rifle had delivered a perfect center hit on one of the most challenging shots in competitive shooting. "Unbelievable," Bull Norrison whispered, lowering his binoculars. "In 30 years of competitive shooting, I've never seen anyone read wind like that." When the first day's scores were tallied, Jessica Thompson held first place overall, the highest position ever achieved by a woman in the national championship qualifiers' history. More significantly, her performance had been so dominant that she'd finished ahead of multiple former national champions and world record holders. The local Montana newspaper ran a front-page story about the woman with the pink rifle who was rewriting precision shooting's record books. Social media exploded with videos of her impossible wind-reading shot, viewed millions of times by shooters around the world. Equipment manufacturers began reaching out with sponsorship offers, recognizing that Jessica had transcended sport to become a cultural phenomenon. But for Jessica, the breakthrough performance was simply confirmation of what she'd always known. With sufficient dedication and training, any limitation could be overcome. The pink rifle that had once symbolized her outsider status now represented something revolutionary, proof that excellence knew no boundaries of gender, convention, or expectation. As she cleaned her equipment that evening, preparing for the second day's even greater challenges, Jessica reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the humiliation of her first competition to the pinnacle of precision shooting success, every shot had been a step toward proving that determination could triumph over prejudice. Tomorrow would bring the ultimate test, the final stages. That would determine which 20 shooters earned the right to compete for a national championship. Jessica's pink rifle was ready for whatever came next. The invitation arrived on official letterhead from the International Precision Shooting Federation, delivered to Jessica's home by certified mail on a crisp October morning. The document was formal, almost ceremonial in its language, but its meaning was revolutionary. Jessica Thompson was being invited to attempt the world precision shooting record at 1,500 meters, a mark that had stood untouched for 8 years. The current record belonged to James Crawford, a British shooter whose legendary 2.847-inch group had been achieved under perfect conditions at the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst. Crawford's record represented the absolute pinnacle of precision marksmanship, a standard so demanding that most shooters considered it unbreachable. In the 8 years since his achievement, hundreds of attempts by the world's best marksmen had failed to come within half an inch of his mark. No American had ever seriously challenged the record. No woman had ever been considered capable of such precision at extreme distance. Jessica's invitation represented a convergence of talent, opportunity, and international recognition that seemed almost surreal. The venue chosen for her attempt was Nevada's Precision Valley Range, a facility specifically designed for ultra-long-range shooting. Located in a desert basin surrounded by mountains, the range offered shooting lanes extending to 2,000 meters with minimal environmental interference. The facility's reputation was legendary among precision shooters. Its near-perfect conditions had witnessed more world records and impossible shots than any other location in North America. News of Jessica's world record attempt spread through the shooting community like wildfire. Social media platforms buzzed with speculation about her chances, with opinions ranging from cautious optimism to outright skepticism. The same woman who'd been mocked for her pink rifle 2 years earlier was now attempting to achieve something no American male or female had ever accomplished. James Crawford himself announced his intention to attend the attempt, making a special trip from England to witness what he privately considered an ambitious but unlikely challenge to his record. In interviews with British shooting magazines, Crawford was diplomatically encouraging while expressing subtle doubts about Jessica's ability to perform under the unique pressures of a world record attempt. Miss Thompson has demonstrated remarkable skill in competition, Crawford told Precision Shooting International. But attempting a world record is an entirely different psychological challenge. The pressure, the media attention, the knowledge that the entire shooting world is watching, these factors affect even the most experienced marksman. We shall see how she responds. Jessica arrived in Nevada 5 days before the scheduled attempt, using the time to acclimate to the desert environment and study the range's unique characteristics. The elevation at Precision Valley was 4,200 feet, significantly different from her familiar Colorado training grounds. Air density, wind patterns, and even the quality of light would affect her shooting in ways that required careful adjustment. Her preparation was exhaustive and systematic. She fired hundreds of rounds at various distances, mapping her rifle's ballistic performance in the Nevada environment. Temperature swings between dawn and midday created thermal currents that shifted bullet trajectories in complex patterns. Wind direction changed throughout the day as desert air heated and cooled, creating challenges that required constant adaptation. Elena Vasquez, Jessica's mentor and former Army markswoman, arrived 3 days before the attempt to serve as her spotter. At 68, Elena had witnessed more shooting history than anyone alive, having been present for 12 world record attempts over 4 decades. Her experience reading conditions and managing the psychological aspects of extreme precision shooting would be invaluable. The technical aspects are the easy part, Elena explained, as they studied wind flags scattered across the 1,500-meter range. Your rifle is capable. Your ammunition is perfect. Your technique is flawless. The challenge will be managing everything else, the cameras, the officials, the knowledge that every shot is being analyzed by experts around the world. The day before the attempt, Crawford arrived at Precision Valley accompanied by a small entourage of British shooting officials and journalists. His presence added gravitas to the event, transforming what might have been a routine record attempt into an international competition between shooting traditions. Crawford's first glimpse of Jessica's pink rifle provoked a reaction that mixed professional curiosity with barely concealed skepticism. The custom Remington 700 was undeniably impressive from a technical standpoint, precision components that represented the absolute cutting edge of accuracy technology. But the hot pink finish remained jarring to traditionalists, who associated serious marksmanship with military earth tones. "Quite distinctive," Crawford observed diplomatically during the pre-attempt meeting. "I must admit, in 40 years of competitive shooting, I've never seen anything quite like it." Jessica's response was characteristically direct. "Color doesn't affect ballistics, Mr. Crawford." The morning of the attempt dawned clear and still, with weather conditions that approached the ideal. Temperature held steady at 58 degrees. Humidity was minimal, and winds measured less than 3 miles per hour from the southwest. Officials from the International Precision Shooting Federation verified equipment specifications and established the protocols that would govern the record attempt. The rules were straightforward but unforgiving. 5 shots fired consecutively at 1,500 meters, with group measurement determining the final result. No spotting rounds, no warm-up shots, no second chances. The current world record of 2.847 inches represented a group smaller than a silver dollar, at nearly a mile distance, a standard of precision that challenged the fundamental limits of rifle accuracy. Media attention was unprecedented for a precision shooting event. Television crews from 3 countries positioned cameras to capture every angle of the attempt. Streaming video platforms prepared to broadcast the event live to thousands of viewers worldwide. The pressure was unlike anything Jessica had experienced, even during her most successful competitions. At precisely 10 a.m. Mountain Time, Jessica assumed her shooting position on the main firing line. Her pink rifle rested on a precision bipod, its distinctive color stark against the neutral tones of the Nevada desert. 150 meters behind her, a gallery of officials, media representatives, and invited guests watched through high-powered spotting scopes. Elena positioned herself next to Jessica with a spotting scope and wind meter, ready to provide environmental data and psychological support. "Conditions are perfect," she whispered. "Wind is steady at 2 miles per hour, temperature stable. No mirage distortion. This is your moment." Jessica loaded her first round, a custom cartridge, hand-loaded to exact specifications developed during months of testing. The bullet was a 175-grain Sierra Match King, seeded to precise depth and powered by a carefully measured charge of Varget powder. Each cartridge represented the culmination of ballistic science, loaded to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Through her scope, the 1,500-meter target appeared impossibly small, a white square, barely visible against the desert backdrop. The crosshairs wavered slightly in rhythm with her heartbeat, a normal physiological response that she'd learned to manage through breathing control and trigger timing. The first shot broke clean and true, the rifle's recoil absorbed smoothly by Jessica's perfected technique. Through spotting scopes, officials tracked the bullet's flight across the Nevada landscape, watching as it arced through the thin desert air with mechanical precision. "Center hit," Elena announced quietly. "Perfect start." Jessica cycled the bolt and loaded her second round, her movements fluid and practiced. The psychological pressure that had intimidated other record attempts seemed to have no effect on her concentration. 2 years of competition had forged mental resilience that treated world record attempts as simply another day at the range. The second shot was equally precise, landing within inches of the first. The third shot completed a tight triangle pattern that had officials leaning forward with growing excitement. Through their high-powered optics, they were witnessing something that approached the theoretical limits of rifle accuracy. Crawford watched through his personal spotting scope, his expression shifting from skeptical observation to genuine amazement. "Extraordinary," he murmured to a British journalist. "I've never seen shooting like this at 1,500 meters." Jessica's fourth shot landed at the precise center of the developing group, creating a pattern that defied belief. The pink rifle that had once been dismissed as a novelty was delivering performance that redefined what was possible in precision marksmanship. As she prepared for the final shot, the one that would determine whether 8 years of British dominance would end Jessica's. Breathing remained steady, her pulse controlled. The entire shooting world was watching, but her focus remained narrowed to the fundamental elements of precision: sight alignment, breathing, trigger control. The fifth shot broke with the same clean precision as the first four, the bullet's flight seemingly guided by destiny rather than ballistics. Through spotting scopes, officials watched as it completed a group pattern that would either secure Jessica's place in shooting history or fall just short of immortality. The silence that followed was absolute. Officials approached the 1,500-meter target with measuring equipment, while the gallery waited in breathless anticipation. Crawford himself requested permission to witness the measurement, understanding that he might be observing the end of his 8-year reign as world record holder. When the official measurement was announced, 2.634 inches, the desert erupted. In cheers that echoed off distant mountains, Jessica Thompson had not merely broken the world record. She had shattered it by more than 0.2 of an inch, achieving precision that redefined the sport's understanding of what was possible. Crawford was among the first to congratulate her, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine admiration. "Miss Thompson," he said, extending his hand, "that was the finest shooting I have ever witnessed. Your record will stand for decades." The pink rifle that had begun as a symbol of defiance had become the instrument of unprecedented achievement, proving that excellence could emerge from the most unexpected places. The news of Jessica Thompson's world record shattered through the global shooting community like a sonic boom, rippling outward from the Nevada desert to reach every corner of the precision marksmanship world. Within hours, videos of her record-breaking performance had been viewed millions of times across social media platforms. The woman with the pink rifle had accomplished something that redefined not just shooting records, but the sport's fundamental understanding of human potential. Major firearms manufacturers began reaching out before Jessica had even left the Precision Valley range. Remington wanted to produce a limited edition Jessica Thompson signature series rifle in hot pink. Nightforce offered an endorsement deal for their optics. Federal Premium proposed developing a custom ammunition line bearing her name. The pink rifle that had once been dismissed as a novelty had become the most sought-after endorsement platform in the shooting industry. But the transformation extended far beyond commercial opportunities. In gun shops across America, young girls who had never considered precision shooting began asking about rifles like the Pink Ladies. Parents who had dismissed their daughters' interest in marksmanship found themselves researching youth shooting programs and beginner classes. The psychological barrier that had kept women from entering a male-dominated sport was crumbling with each retelling of Jessica's impossible journey. Sarah Chun, an 11-year-old from California whose parents owned a sporting goods store, became emblematic of the pink revolution. After watching Jessica's world record attempt online, Sarah convinced her reluctant father to let her try precision shooting. Within 6 months, she was outscoring teenage boys at local youth matches using a custom .22 rifle, finished in bright purple, her own defiant statement against conventional expectations. "I want to be like the pink rifle lady," Sarah told local newspaper reporter. "She showed me that girls can be better shooters than boys. Color doesn't matter. Skill matters." The transformation wasn't limited to young shooters. Established women competitors who had spent years trying to blend into the masculine culture of precision shooting began embracing more distinctive equipment and approaches. Rifles appeared in colors ranging from bright teal to sunset orange, each one a small rebellion against the sport's traditional aesthetic conformity. Bull Morrison, now 61 and officially retired from competition, found himself coaching more female shooters than male ones at his Colorado training facility. The legendary champion who had once dismissed Jessica's pink rifle now displayed a photo of her world record group prominently in his office, a reminder that excellence could emerge from the most unexpected sources. She changed everything, Boole admitted to a visiting journalist. Not just for women, but for all of us. Jessica proved that the limitations we thought were absolute were really just limitations in our imagination. She showed us what dedication and persistence could accomplish when freed from conventional thinking. The international impact was equally profound. British shooting clubs reported increased female participation after James Crawford publicly endorsed Jessica's achievement and invited her to conduct training seminars in England. European manufacturers began producing precision rifles in non-traditional colors, recognizing that Jessica had created an entirely new market segment. Jessica herself handled the sudden fame with the same methodical approach she applied to everything else. She established the Jessica Thompson Foundation, dedicated to introducing young women to precision shooting sports through scholarship programs and equipment grants. Her first initiative provided custom rifles and training to 50 girls from underserved communities, each rifle finished in whatever color the recipient chose. My father taught me that shooting was about precision, discipline, and respect. Jessica explained during the Foundation's launch event. Those values don't depend on gender, background, or the color of your equipment. If my story helps one young woman discover her potential, then everything I've been through was worth it. The pink Remington 700 that had carried Jessica through her transformation was retired to a place of honor in her home, displayed alongside the official certificate from the International Precision Shooting Federation, confirming her world record. But the rifle's influence continued to grow, inspiring countless replicas and tributes from shooters around the world. Precision shooting ranges across America began hosting Pink Rifle Days, events specifically designed to welcome women and girls to the sport. Equipment manufacturers developed entry-level precision rifles marketed specifically to female shooters, with adjustable stocks and ergonomic features designed for smaller frames. What had begun as Jessica's personal statement of defiance had evolved into a movement that was reshaping the entire shooting sports industry. The technical aspects of Jessica's achievement continued to fascinate ballistics experts and shooting coaches. Her training methods, particularly the intensive isolation practice that had forged her mental resilience, became subjects of academic study. Military sniper schools incorporated elements of her psychological conditioning techniques into their curricula. The woman who had been mocked for her unconventional approach had inadvertently revolutionized training methodologies across multiple disciplines. Elena Vasquez, Jessica's mentor and spotter during the world record attempt, found herself overwhelmed with requests for coaching services. Young women who had seen Jessica's success wanted to learn from the woman who had guided her through the crucial moments. Elena, now 69, established her own training academy, specifically for female precision shooters, using techniques developed during Jessica's transformation. Jessica's story isn't really about shooting, Elena reflected during an interview with Precision Shooting magazine. It's about the power of refusing to accept other people's limitations. She decided that being different was an advantage, not a disadvantage. That lesson applies far beyond marksmanship. The psychological impact on the broader shooting community was profound. Male competitors who had initially dismissed Jessica found themselves studying her techniques and training methods. The same individuals who had mocked her pink rifle now sought to understand the mental conditioning that had made her seemingly immune to pressure and psychological warfare. Rick Patterson, the former Navy SEAL who had witnessed Jessica's early transformation, incorporated her visualization and mental preparation techniques into his own training programs for military and law enforcement personnel. What Jessica achieved wasn't just about physical skill, Rick explained to his students. She developed mental resilience that allowed her to perform at peak level, regardless of external pressure. That's a skill that applies to any high-stress situation. 3 years after her world record, Jessica's influence had fundamentally altered competitive precision shooting. Women comprised nearly 30% of new competitors, up from less than 5% before her breakthrough. Equipment manufacturers reported that colorful, customized rifles had become their fastest-growing product category. Youth participation in shooting sports had increased dramatically, driven largely by young girls who saw Jessica as proof that they could excel in any field they chose. The abandoned quarry where Jessica had conducted her secret training became an unofficial pilgrimage site for aspiring precision shooters. Local authorities eventually developed it into a proper shooting facility, naming it the Jessica Thompson Memorial Range, in honor of her father's military service and her own contributions to the sport. When asked about her legacy during a recent interview, Jessica's response was characteristically humble and forward-looking. "I hope people remember that excellence isn't about conforming to expectations. It's about exceeding them." The pink rifle was never about making a fashion statement. It was about refusing to be invisible, refusing to accept that I didn't belong. If that message helps other people find their own strength, then everything we accomplished was worth it. The rifle range where she continued her daily practice sessions had evolved into a training destination for shooters from around the world. Students came not just to learn marksmanship techniques, but to understand the mental approach that had transformed a mocked novice into the world's most precise shooter. Jessica's world record still stands today, a testament to what becomes possible when determination meets opportunity and convention meets revolution. The pink rifle that began as a symbol of defiance had become an icon of excellence, proving that the greatest achievements often come from the most unexpected places. In shooting sports museums across America, displays now feature Jessica's story as a turning point in the sport's evolution. But perhaps the most meaningful tribute sits in Sarah Chun's bedroom in California, a photo of her purple rifle alongside a poster of Jessica's pink Remington with a handwritten note, "Color doesn't matter. Dreams do." The revolution that began with a single pink rifle had transformed not just a sport, but an entire generation's understanding of what was possible when courage met persistence and convention met change.